Marcus Brennan stood in his study, staring at the deed on his desk. The property was worth £15,000, and it was made out to her. The housemaid his neighbor had called ruined goods. The same woman who had just walked out his door, leaving behind only this deed and a letter that read, "For everything you didn't know you needed." His hands trembled as he unfolded the second paper beneath it, a marriage certificate, signed but undated. But to understand how a rejected maid became the woman who saved his life, we must go back to the autumn day when Marcus Brennan made the decision his wealthy neighbor called social suicide. It was a crisp afternoon in 1885 when Marcus Brennan rode out to his neighbor Lord Edmund Hartley's estate. A long, shadowed path lined with thick oaks stretched between their properties, and Marcus's thoughts were heavy with the weight of his own grief. 2 years had passed since his wife, Catherine, died in childbirth, and though the days blurred together, his sorrow remained sharp, cutting deeper each time he wandered through the rooms of Manor Hill, now empty, cold, and untouched. The invitation from Lord Hartley had been brief but clear: tea at his estate, as it had been every month for the past year. But today, something felt different. As Marcus approached, he noticed the sound of raised voices from the back gardens. A door slammed, and Marcus saw a woman walking swiftly down the path. She was tall, her posture straight, but there was something about her that caught his eye. Her face was hardened, like a woman who had seen too much, and her hands, scarred, as though from fire, seemed to tremble ever so slightly as she clutched a small suitcase. Marcus dismounted his horse and, sensing something was amiss, stepped forward toward Lord Hartley, who was standing in the doorway, his face twisted in anger. "You're tainted, Miss Ashford. No respectable household will employ someone with your unfortunate history." Lord Hartley spat, his words harsh and cutting. The woman, Elena Ashford, turned and walked away without a word, her dignity intact despite the venom in his voice. Marcus watched her leave, a strange ache filling his chest. The injustice of it burned within him. A former governess, now reduced to being a pariah, simply because of some cruel fate. Marcus could not look away, not from a woman who had been so humiliated. Something stirred in him, a deep sense of injustice. And before he knew what he was doing, he was on his horse, following her down the narrow, winding road that led to the village. He caught up with her as she reached the outskirts of the village, just as the last golden light of the day began to fade behind the hills. His voice startled her as he called out, "Miss Ashford, wait." She paused, turning slowly to face him. There was a guarded expression in her eyes, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might refuse to speak with him. But instead, she nodded stiffly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "How may I help you, sir?" she asked, her voice low, controlled. Marcus hesitated, the words catching in his throat. I couldn't help but overhear. And, well, it seems to me that you're someone who deserves better than this." He could see the skepticism in her eyes, but he pushed on. "I'd like to offer you a position at Manor Hill. No references required. Just a fair wage and a place to stay. I believe Lord Hartley is a pompous fool, and anyone he despises might be exactly who I need." Her eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, she looked as if she might laugh. A gentleman hiring a woman publicly shamed? Why would you do such a thing? Marcus leaned forward slightly, his gaze firm. "Because I believe that sometimes the world's judgment is wrong. And I'd like to prove that with you." She studied him for a long moment, her mind working through the possibilities. Finally, she gave a slow, hesitant nod. "I will accept, on one condition," she said, her voice steady but cautious. "I will not be your charity case." Marcus nodded, grateful for her response. "You won't be. You'll have a job, and I will respect it." As she turned to leave, her back straight and her head held high, Marcus felt a strange sense of hope. He had taken a step towards something he could not yet name, but in his heart, he knew it was the right decision. The next morning, Lord Hartley arrived at Manor Hill, his expression one of disdain. Marcus greeted him at the gate, but before he could speak, Hartley wasted no time. "You've made a grave mistake, Brennan," Lord Hartley warned. "That woman is a stain on your reputation. You've given her a place in your home, and I promise you, it will only bring you trouble. Elena Ashford is dangerous." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "She's been nothing but kind and professional to me." Lord Hartley's face twisted into something close to pity. "Do you know her history? She's the one they blame for the fire that took her employer's life. The one they say caused everything to burn. Her hands, those scars, those are a testament to her guilt, Brennan." Marcus took a step closer, his voice calm but firm. "I'll make my own judgment. Thank you for your concern, but I'm not interested in your opinion." Hartley snorted, turning on his heel and walking away. As Marcus watched him retreat, a deep sense of certainty settled over him. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back now. When Elena Ashford arrived at Manor Hill later that afternoon, she came on foot, a single bag in hand. Her face was calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension in her step. The large house loomed before her, grand but cold. She paused at the door, taking in the sight of the place. A house filled with beautiful things, yet empty of life, she muttered to herself, her voice barely audible. Inside, the manor was just as Marcus had left it, stark and quiet. The sheets were still over the furniture, dust gathering on the unused surfaces. But Elena's eyes saw more than the emptiness. She saw the house not just as it was, but as it could be, a place that could be alive again. She glanced up to find Marcus standing at the top of the stairs, watching her. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "This is my home," he said quietly, "and I've not had the courage to fill it with life again. But perhaps, together, we can change that." Elena nodded slowly, the weight of the words settling in her chest. She could feel the echo of her own loss, mirrored in him. "I'll do my best, Mr. Brennan," she replied softly, "but it will take time." As she moved into the manor, Marcus followed, silently hoping she was right. As Elena moved through the house, she found herself standing before a closed door at the end of the hall. Marcus had never spoken of it, but there was something about the locked door that beckoned her. She reached out, her fingers brushing the cool wood. And for the first time since her arrival, Elena felt something stir within her, something beyond duty or fear. She turned the handle. Elena stood in front of the piano in a music room, the soft glow of the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the walls of the room. As her fingers touched the keys, the melody of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata began to fill the silence of the house, rich and haunting in its beauty. Marcus stood in the doorway, transfixed, his gaze locked on her hands as they moved across the keys with a grace that seemed at odds with the burns marring her skin. It was then that Elena finally spoke, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "I was once a concert pianist," she admitted without looking up. "But after the fire, I lost more than just my hands. I lost my future." Marcus stepped closer, captivated not just by the music, but by the pain beneath her words. As she stopped playing, Elena's voice faltered as she continued. "I was employed by a wealthy merchant, a man named Mr. Whitmore. He was kind and encouraging, and he was the one who insisted I continue playing despite my injury. But after the fire, they accused me of theft, of starting the fire to cover up my supposed crime. There was no proof, but no one believed me. My reputation was destroyed, and I've been moving from village to village ever since." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Marcus, who had never truly spoken of his own grief, felt a deep connection to her, as if they were two souls bound by loss, each struggling to rebuild what had been taken from them. Later that evening, when a manor was quiet and the shadows of night had settled over the house, Marcus found himself wandering the halls, unable to sleep, and to his surprise, he found Elena in the kitchen, quietly making herbal tea. "I don't sleep much either," she said as she noticed him standing in the doorway. He joined her at the counter, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus spoke of his own pain. I've been living in a frozen state since Catherine died. I can't move forward, and I can't let go. Elena's eyes softened, and she responded, Loss doesn't heal by ignoring it, Mr. Brennan. Sometimes you have to face it, or it will consume you. Her words struck him deeply, and he realized that Elena, despite her own suffering, had wisdom that he desperately needed. Slowly, over the following weeks, Marcus began to trust her more, sharing his meals with her, and bit by bit, she began to bring life back into Manor Hill, opening the curtains to let in the light, tending to the garden, and even playing simple tunes on the piano, creating an atmosphere that was once again filled with sound and purpose. But despite the peace she brought, the gossip of the village began to reach Marcus. Whispers about the woman who was known as the Fire Woman, the one who was considered dangerous and cursed. Lord Hartley, still intent on ridding the village of Elena, sent a constable to warn Marcus, but Marcus stood firm. When Hartley confronted him with accusations of Elena's guilt, Marcus dismissed him with cold finality, saying, I've made my decision, and I will not be swayed by your petty jealousy. That night, after Hartley's warning, Elena and Marcus spoke openly for the first time, and she shared the truth about the night the fire had started. Her employer, Mr. Whitmore, had been kind to her, supporting her dream of playing the piano, but it was his nephew, Thomas Whitmore, who had set the fire in the study, hoping to inherit his uncle's wealth early. Elena, who had been in the opposite wing of the house, had tried to save his ledgers and other documents, but the fire spread too quickly. The Whitmore family, desperate to cover up the crime, blamed her. Though there was no proof of her involvement, the scandal destroyed her life, and she had been running ever since. As she finished her story, Elena's gaze met Marcus's, and she whispered, I've never been able to outrun the past. No matter where I go, it always follows me. For a long moment, Marcus remained silent, taking in the weight of her words. Finally, he spoke, his voice resolute. You're not going anywhere. I won't allow it. And for the first time, Elena saw not just the grief in Marcus's eyes, but the strength that had been dormant within him since Catherine's death. He was starting to come alive again, and it was because of her. Despite the gossip, despite the village's judgment, Marcus made up his mind that he would not abandon her. He would protect her, and together, they would face whatever came their way. As they sat together in the quiet of the evening, Marcus's thoughts turned inward. He had always been a man of duty and responsibility, but for the first time in 2 years, he felt something else, a spark of hope. But just as he was beginning to believe that he could finally move forward, Lord Hartley came with one last, cruel attempt to tear them apart. He confronted Marcus again, this time with a locket he claimed had been found in Elena's room. This locket, Hartley sneered, was stolen from the Whitmore family during the fire, and it was found in her possession. She is guilty, Brennan. You can't escape that. But Elena's face paled as she looked at the locket. I've never seen it before, she whispered. It was planted. Someone is trying to destroy me completely. In that moment, Marcus knew what he had to do. He would investigate the fire himself. He would find the truth, no matter the cost, and clear Elena's name once and for all. But little did he know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would forever alter the course of their lives. And as he prepared to leave Manor Hill to begin his search for the truth, Elena made a decision of her own, to leave, so as not to further harm Marcus's reputation. But Marcus wasn't about to let her go. As he watched her pack, he stopped her with a firm hand on her shoulder. You're not going anywhere, Elena. Not without me. His declaration hung in the air, and for the first time, Elena allowed herself to hope. Hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a place in this world again, alongside a man who had become the first person to truly understand her. But as Marcus prepared to leave, the mystery deepened, and the journey to uncover the truth had only just begun. Marcus stood in the music room, the letter trembling in his hands. Elena stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the paper, Yet she remained silent, sensing the weight of the moment. The letter was from his late wife, Catherine, and it had been hidden away in the jewelry box for 2 years, untouched until now. With a shaky breath, Marcus unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words written in Catherine's familiar handwriting. As he read aloud, the room seemed to close in around him, and Elena, despite her own grief, could sense the raw pain Marcus had been hiding all this time. Catherine's letter revealed that she had known the pregnancy was risky. The doctor had warned her, but she had chosen to go forward with it anyway, wanting to give Marcus the child they had both dreamed of. The final words in the letter cut through him like a dagger. Please don't let my death be the end of your life. Promise me you'll find joy again. For the first time since Catherine's death, Marcus allowed himself to cry, the tears flowing freely as he clutched the letter to his chest. Elena, standing beside him, felt her heart break for the man she had come to admire, knowing that she had never seen him truly grieve until now. The quiet moments stretched on, and Elena, ever the caretaker, offered him her comfort. Though her own heart ached for the past she could never fully escape. As they stood there together, Marcus spoke softly. I've been dead alongside her. You're the first person who's made me feel alive. Elena's response was measured, but it held a deep truth. I lost myself in that fire. Not just my hands, my entire future. I'm not the person you need, Marcus. My past, it shadows everything. Yet even as she spoke those words, she knew deep down that the connection between them was undeniable, and despite her fears, there was something stirring in her, a desire for something she thought was lost forever. The following days were filled with tension, as Marcus began to change the atmosphere of Manor Hill, slowly filling it with life once again. He shared meals with Elena, breaking long-held traditions of isolation, and in doing so, the house began to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. But as the gossip from the village reached Marcus, whispers about the Fire Woman and her supposed curse began to seep into his world, and the pressure from society, especially Lord Hartley, grew stronger. Hartley, relentless as ever, sent a constable to warn Marcus about the danger Elena posed to his reputation, but Marcus refused to bend. He didn't care what the village thought. Elena had become far more to him than just a hired staff member. As they sat together one night, Elena finally shared the full truth of what had happened all those years ago. She spoke of Mr. Whitmore, her kind employer, and how his nephew, Thomas Whitmore, had set the fire in the study to cover his gambling debts. Elena had been blamed for the fire, though she had been nowhere near the source, and the lack of evidence had done nothing to clear her name. She had been moving from village to village ever since, never able to escape the shadow of the scandal. As Marcus listened, a new understanding began to form in his heart. Elena had been running from a past that had never been her fault, and now she was here, in his life, fighting not just for her own future, but for his as well. When Lord Hartley tried once more to interfere, presenting a locket he claimed to have found in Elena's room as evidence of her guilt, Marcus knew immediately that it was another attempt to frame her. Elena's face went pale at the sight of the locket, and she insisted she had never seen it before, realizing that it had been planted in her room. With that, Marcus's resolve hardened. He would clear her name, no matter the cost. As the night wore on, Elena began to prepare to leave, believing that her presence was putting Marcus's life in danger. She could not allow herself to be the reason for his social ruin. But Marcus, now more determined than ever, refused to let her go. He told her with unwavering conviction, I know you, perhaps better than anyone, and I won't let them do this. With that declaration, he set out to investigate the fire himself. His business connections allowed him to access records and speak to witnesses, and as he pieced the puzzle together, he discovered the shocking truth. Thomas Whitmore had been deep in debt, and the fire had started in the study where his uncle kept the money. The pieces were falling into place, and Marcus knew that the next step was to find the key witness who could expose Thomas Whitmore's crime. But as he returned to Manor Hill to prepare for the journey, he was met with the devastating news that Elena had disappeared. The butler informed him that Lord Hartley, in his usual spiteful manner, had taken Elena away, accusing her of threatening his wife. An entirely fabricated story. Marcus, desperate to find her, rode out to the county jail where she was being held, only to find her collapsed in her cell, feverish and weak from the cold and stress. It was a moment of crushing realization for Marcus. He had failed to protect her in the one moment when she needed him most. As he carried her back to Manor Hill, knowing the scandal that would follow, he vowed to do whatever it took to make things right. And as Elena's fever broke, the final pieces of their journey were set in motion, leading them both toward a future neither had ever expected. The days that followed Elena's return to Manor Hill were filled with an intense, quiet resolve. Marcus had brought her back against the magistrate's orders, knowing full well that his actions could result in more than just social ruin. The fever that had racked Elena's body had passed, but her strength was still fragile, and Marcus remained by her side, watching her every move, making sure she didn't slip back into the darkness of the trauma that had been inflicted upon her. He sat at her bedside for days, reading to her from books she had left behind in her youth, soothing her when nightmares haunted her sleep. His presence was a comfort, though neither of them spoke about the growing weight of the scandal hanging over them. As Elena's fever finally broke, she opened her eyes, blinking against the light of the late afternoon sun. Marcus sat there, his face drawn with worry, but there was something else, something softer in his gaze. He helped her sit up, and for the first time in days, they had a real conversation. Elena, her voice quiet but clear, spoke. "You shouldn't have done this, Marcus. You've already sacrificed so much for me. Now, we're both in danger." Marcus shook his head, his grip firm around her hand. "I don't care about what happens to me, Elena. You're worth every risk, and no matter what the world thinks, I'll be here." Elena didn't answer right away, her thoughts caught in the whirlwind of her past and the present. She had grown used to isolation, to being on the run, and now, even though Marcus had stood by her, a small part of her wanted to protect him from the consequences of her own misfortune. But there was no escaping the truth. The trial was coming, and they both knew it. As the magistrate's hearing date loomed closer, the tension between them only grew, the walls of Manor Hill echoing with the weight of both their histories. Marcus had sent word to the witnesses he had gathered, Elena's former employers who had known her before the fire, the kitchen maid who had witnessed the true culprit that night, and even the fire marshal who had been part of the investigation years ago. Every piece of evidence he had uncovered pointed toward Elena's innocence. Yet Marcus knew that the world had already passed judgment on her. It would take more than just facts to change people's minds. In the days leading up to the trial, Lord Hartley escalated his campaign against Marcus, sending letters demanding that Elena be removed from the house, threatening to ruin his business deals if Marcus didn't comply. Hartley's jealousy and bitterness were clear, and he sought to destroy everything Marcus had built: his name, his wealth, his reputation. Marcus, however, stood firm. He refused to bow to Hartley's demands. The village whispers, too, grew louder, with many calling Elena the fire woman and condemning her as nothing more than a cursed soul who brought ruin wherever she went. But Marcus was not deterred. He had come to understand something about Elena that no one else could see. The strength she carried in her, not despite her past, but because of it. On the morning of the trial, Marcus stood outside the courthouse, the heavy air of judgment pressing against him. Elena, still weak, was by his side. She was dressed in a simple but elegant gown, her hair pinned back with careful precision. But even with all the preparations, there was no disguising the exhaustion in her eyes. She had fought so long to clear her name, but now, as the trial approached, she was terrified that it might all be for nothing. As they entered the courthouse, Marcus could feel the weight of every eye on them, the town's judgment palpable in the air. The courtroom was filled with villagers, some supporting them, others sneering at their presence. Lord Hartley sat across from them, his expression smug, his lawyer already prepared with false accusations. As the proceedings began, Marcus presented his evidence. The testimony of the kitchen maid who had seen Thomas Whitmore in the study the night of the fire, the fire marshal's report proving that the fire had started in the study, and the complete lack of any proof linking Elena to the crime. The witnesses spoke one by one, the weight of their words shifting the atmosphere in the room. But just as Marcus thought they might have a chance, Lord Hartley's lawyer presented what he claimed was irrefutable evidence, a locket that had allegedly been found in Elena's room, one that had once belonged to the Whitmore family. He argued that the locket was a piece of stolen property, further solidifying Elena's guilt in the eyes of the court. Elena's face went pale as she looked at the locket. She had never seen it before, but she knew in that moment that it had been planted there. The truth of it hit her like a blow. Someone was going to great lengths to ruin her, to destroy the little piece she had found in Marcus. As the trial continued, Marcus stood firm, demanding that the locket be examined further. "This is a lie," he declared. "You are attempting to destroy a woman who has already suffered enough." As the drama unfolded, the door to the courtroom swung open, and in walked Lady Hartley, Lord Hartley's wife, her face drawn but resolute. The room fell silent as she made her way to the front of the court, where she was sworn in as a witness. The spectators watched in disbelief as Lady Hartley spoke the truth. She had been married to a man obsessed with control, a man who could not bear the thought of a woman pursuing a life of independence. She revealed that her own sister, a talented pianist, had been disowned by their family for marrying against their will. Lady Hartley's words struck a chord in the room, her testimony revealing not only Lord Hartley's cruelty, but his deep-rooted fear of any woman who dared to challenge his authority. "I've seen the woman my husband despises," Lady Hartley said quietly, "and I've come to see that she is not what he claims her to be. Elena is a victim, just as I was, and I believe she deserves to be free." The courtroom was stunned into silence as Lady Hartley's testimony shifted the balance of the case. The locket was dismissed as a planted piece of evidence, and Elena's innocence was made clear to all present. But even as the trial came to a close, Marcus knew that their struggles were far from over. Lord Hartley's reputation had been shattered, but the damage to Elena's had already been done. As the magistrate issued his verdict, Elena was cleared of all charges. The village gossip would continue. People would whisper, and Elena would remain a pariah in their eyes. But Marcus was not about to let her go. He stepped forward, declaring to the room, "I don't care what they say. I don't care about their opinions. Elena Ashford is no longer just my employee. She's the woman I love." Elena looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. Hope. Marcus wasn't just fighting for her innocence. He was fighting for their future, for the life they could have together. But Elena, still burdened by her past, hesitated. "You don't understand," she said softly. "My reputation is ruined. No matter what the court says, the world will always see me as the firewoman. I'll only bring you more trouble." Marcus shook his head. "Then let them talk. We'll face it together. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." Despite the turmoil, despite the whispers that would continue to follow them, Marcus knew that the only way forward was with Elena by his side. But even as the room erupted in murmurs, Elena stepped back, the weight of their future still too much for her to bear. And just as Marcus reached out to stop her, she turned, walking away. Her fear was palpable, and Marcus felt a deep sense of loss. He had won the battle, but would he lose her in the end? As she left, the final twist of fate came in the form of a letter, one that would change everything. The days after the trial were quieter than Marcus had ever expected, though the silence in Manor Hill seemed louder than ever. Elena had left him, the decision final, her departure like a shadow that loomed over everything, even the Grand Manor. The house, once filled with the sound of her music and her laughter, felt colder and more lifeless than ever. The village gossips hadn't stopped their whispers, but Marcus wasn't interested in them anymore. He no longer cared about the opinions of the people who had once been his friends, who had once shared his world. All he cared about now was Elena. As he stood by the window, staring out over the fields, his thoughts were consumed by her absence. She had told him it was better this way, that his future didn't need to be overshadowed by her scandal. But Marcus couldn't accept that. He had already made his decision. He was willing to face the world with her, no matter the consequences. But Elena had chosen differently, choosing freedom from the scandal, freedom from him, and he couldn't let her go. Not now, not after everything they had shared. Determined to find her, Marcus began the search. He knew that finding Elena would not be easy. She had vanished as quickly as she had appeared in his life. But he wasn't about to let her slip away without a fight. He contacted every business associate he had, using every resource at his disposal, searching for any clue as to where she might be. His search led him to the village church, where he spent hours poring over the old church records. There, buried in the dusty pages, he found a mention of Elena, her name listed in the parish register of the small village in the Lake District. She had been teaching piano to village children there, living a quiet life far away from the turmoil of Manor Hill. Marcus knew that was where he had to go. The journey would be long and difficult, but nothing would stop him from finding her. He had already sold half of his business shares to fund this journey, making sure he would have the means to start over if that's what it took. He no longer needed the wealth or the grandeur of Manor Hill. All he needed was Elena. The trip to the Lake District took 3 days, each hour stretching on as Marcus rode through the countryside. Every mile a reminder of what he had lost and what he hoped to find again. As he arrived in the village, he asked around, speaking to locals who seemed hesitant to speak of Elena. But eventually, one kind soul directed him to a small cottage by the edge of a sparkling lake. Marcus walked the last mile alone, his heart pounding in his chest. As he neared the cottage, he caught sight of her, Elena, standing by the window, her profile silhouetted against the setting sun. She was teaching children, her hands moving gracefully over the piano keys, her voice soft as she guided them. Marcus stood there, watching her for a moment, afraid to disturb the fragile peace she had found, but knowing that he couldn't leave without speaking to her. He hesitated at the door, his heart heavy with the weight of his feelings for her, unsure of how to approach her, unsure of how she would react to him after everything that had happened. When Elena finally saw him standing in the doorway, her expression shifted from surprise to guarded caution. "What are you doing here, Mr. Brennan?" she asked, her voice cool but tinged with an emotion he couldn't quite place. Marcus stepped forward, his gaze fixed on her. "I came to find you. I've been searching for you, and I'm not leaving until I've told you the truth." Elena's expression softened, but she didn't invite him inside. Instead, she stood there, waiting for him to speak. "I can't let you go, Elena. Not now, not after everything. I've made my peace with my past, but I can't move forward without you." Her eyes flickered with emotion, but she didn't speak. Marcus continued, "I sold half of my shares. I don't need them anymore. I don't need Manor Hill or any of it. I need you. You're the only thing that matters to me now." She stepped back, shaking her head, her voice trembling as she spoke. "You don't understand, Marcus. I've already ruined your life. I'm a burden, a scandal waiting to happen. I don't want to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. You deserve better than this." Marcus took a step closer, his voice firm. "You're not a burden. You're everything I've ever wanted, everything I've been searching for. I'm not asking for a perfect life, Elena. I'm asking for the chance to build one with you, whatever it looks like." She turned away, her hands shaking as she gripped the doorframe. "I'm not the same woman you met, Marcus. I'm broken, scarred, and I've spent my whole life trying to outrun my past. How can you love someone like me?" Marcus moved toward her, taking her hands in his. "I don't love you in spite of your past. I love you because of it, because you're strong, and because you've survived everything the world has thrown at you. I don't need a perfect woman. I need you." Elena's breath hitched as she met his gaze. For a moment, she seemed to hesitate, as if she were weighing the cost of accepting his love, of allowing herself to believe that happiness might be possible. Finally, she whispered, "What if I'm not enough for you?" Marcus smiled softly, his hand cupping her face gently. "You've always been enough, Elena. You've always been more than I ever deserved." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was something else in them now. Something softer, something that told Marcus she was beginning to believe that perhaps they could have a future together. After a long silence, Elena finally spoke. "I love you, Marcus, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to stay. I'm afraid." He kissed her forehead gently, his voice full of conviction as he whispered, "Then we'll face the fear together. No more running. No more hiding. We'll build our future one step at a time, and we'll do it together." She nodded slowly, and for the first time in a long while, Elena allowed herself to feel the hope that had been buried deep within her. As the two of them stood there, by the lake, their hearts beating in sync, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. They would have challenges ahead, but for the first time, he felt certain that they could face them together. Elena had given him the greatest gift he could ever have: hope for a future and the courage to claim it. As they walked back toward the cottage, Marcus knew that this was the life he had been waiting for. They didn't need to know exactly what the future held. All they needed was each other, and with that, they would find their way forward, no matter what came next. Marcus and Elena's return to Manor Hill was a quiet one, but the air around them was thick with unspoken words and new promises. For Elena, the once cold and silent halls of the manor now seemed alive with possibility, though her heart was heavy with the weight of her past. She had agreed to marry Marcus, and though she had long feared the repercussions of her past, the love that had grown between them was undeniable. They had made a pact to build a life together, without letting the shadows of society's judgment define them. As the days passed, Elena began to see Manor Hill not just as the place of her past trauma, but as a place where she could carve out a new future, a place where they could both start over. The decision to stay in a manor, however, came with its own challenges. The villagers, who had always whispered about the fire woman, continued to gossip, their judgment seeping into every conversation and every glance. But Marcus, unwavering in his love and commitment to her, refused to let it affect their plans. He had already made it clear to his business partners in the town that he would not let Elena's past dictate his future, and he had made a promise to her that he would never break. With that promise, they began to envision a new purpose for the sprawling estate, something that would bring new life to the empty rooms and give back to the community that had long ago cast her aside. Elena had always dreamed of running a school, a place where children could learn not just to play music, but to express themselves, to find their voices. The idea of opening a music school was one that had been brewing inside her for years, but she had never allowed herself to believe it was possible. Now, with Marcus's full support, it was becoming a reality. They decided to turn the grand but empty rooms into classrooms and dormitories, using Elena's inherited estate and Marcus's business connections to fund the renovations. The transformation of Manor Hill began, and as the walls were painted and the rooms were filled with new furniture and instruments, a sense of purpose settled in both their hearts. For Elena, it was more than just a building. It was a place where she could heal, where her scars could be turned into something beautiful. For Marcus, it was a way to honor the woman he loved and to make sure she never had to carry the weight of her past alone again. The work was hard, but it was filled with the kind of joy that comes from creating something meaningful. As the school began to take shape, the village too began to change its tune. The whispers began to fade, replaced by curiosity and, eventually, admiration. Elena's talent and dedication to her students spoke for itself, and the once judgmental townspeople began to see her for what she truly was, a woman who had fought for everything she had and had come out stronger on the other side. The first students of the Ashford Academy for Musical Arts arrived, and the classrooms were filled with the sounds of young voices, their laughter, and the melody of instruments being played by eager hands. It was a sight that Elena had once thought impossible, but now it was her reality. She watched as the children learned, grew, and found their own voices in the music they played. Her scarred hands, once a source of shame, now played a different role. They were the hands that taught, that encouraged, that gave hope. It was a powerful feeling, and as she looked around the school she had built, a sense of peace filled her heart. Marcus was there by her side, as always, supporting her every step of the way. He had found new joy in watching her thrive, in seeing her become the woman he had always known she was. The love between them had grown, and though they still faced the occasional whisper and sideways glance, they had each other, and that was all they needed. 6 months after the academy opened, Elena decided to host a grand recital. It would be the first time her students performed for the county, and she was both excited and nervous. It was a chance to show the world the progress they had made, to prove that the Ashford Academy was not just a dream, but a success. The night of the recital, Manor Hill was filled with the soft glow of candlelight, the sound of laughter, and the rustle of excited students preparing for their performance. Marcus, ever the supportive husband, stood in the back of the room, watching with pride as Elena helped her students prepare. As the audience filled the seats, the children took their places, and Elena walked to the front of the room, her hands trembling slightly as she addressed the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight. It means more to me than you can know. These children have worked so hard to get here, and this recital is not just a celebration of their achievements, but of the community that has supported us. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces in the crowd before resting on Marcus. This is a moment I thought I would never see. But with each of you, and with the love and support of my husband, I've found the courage to dream again. And for that, I am forever grateful. The audience erupted into applause, and Marcus's heart swelled with pride. Elena had found her place, and she had done so with strength, grace, and the kind of resilience that made her the woman he loved. As the recital began, the students played beautifully, their music filling the room with joy and emotion. Elena stood at the back, her eyes glistening with unshed tears as she watched her students perform. It was a moment of triumph, not just for her, but for all of them. After the recital, Marcus and Elena walked together through the gardens, the evening air cool against their skin. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time, she felt truly at peace. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Choosing scandal over safety? Choosing me?" Marcus smiled, his hand gently holding hers. "Every day, I'm grateful I was foolish enough to follow a rejected maid down a country road," he said with a laugh. "And I'm grateful you were desperate enough to accept a job from a stranger." They shared a quiet laugh, their hands entwined, as they walked through the garden, the laughter of their students still echoing through the halls of Manor Hill. It was a perfect moment, one that was years in the making, and for the first time in a long time, both of them felt that they had finally found their place. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the estate, and as they walked hand in hand, Marcus knew that this was what they had both been searching for. The perfect spot. Their perfect spot. They didn't need to explain themselves to the world anymore. They had each other, and that was all that mattered. As they stood in the garden, the light fading around them, they knew that this was only the beginning. Together, they had created a life full of purpose, love, and music, and that was more than enough. The end of their story had come, but the beginning of their new life had only just begun. The Manor Hill was alive again, and so were they. The music, the laughter, the love, everything was just as it should be. They had found their perfect spot, and nothing would take it away from them.